name is Vinita. Welcome, Vinita. I'm glad to have you today. And I know that you are a patient and you are doing an amazing job as a psychotherapist. Right now with the COVID-19, you are doing more like the teleconference instead of one-on-one with your patient. My first question would be, how are you doing?
Well, it's been a very challenging time, but I feel more than ever that I'm like a soldier being called to duty almost. On a daily basis, I get a lot of phone calls because I've been offering free consultation services. Sometimes those can go on for hours. And there are a lot of my clients now that are not in a financial position where they can afford to pay me. So I've been offering sliding scales, and for some people have actually waived the charges completely just because they've lost their jobs and they really need the help. And as a social worker, I don't have the heart to charge somebody when they can barely afford food. So it's just the way it is. So I do get affected, of course, like any person who helps people. We need to take care of ourselves, and I haven't been the best at that. I used to be better, because I am an empath by nature, so I do take on a lot of things emotionally. So it does affect my sleep, and it does affect my concentration. But I do meditate regularly through take breaks, regular breaks throughout the day, and I do kind of process with myself. And I try to use a lot of the health sort of tips and strategies that I give my clients.
Okay, we're going to talk about that later. Could you also please introduce yourself,
Sure.
what you are doing?
Sure. So my name is Vinita Buri, and I'm a social worker by profession. I provide psychotherapy services, but I also am an educator. I'm a trainer. I do mediation, which is sort of the heart of what I do. And what that means, it's helping clients who are in conflict. So it could be couples, but it could also be organizations. It's basically people who are having arguments, who are not agreeing on basic things. Oftentimes, people use me for divorce, for example. So, if right now there's a huge rise in domestic violence that's going on, and also a lot of people are going through a divorce or separation process. And you can imagine how hard this must be for children and people having to live in the same environment, even though they might hate each other. And it's a very dangerous, unsafe kind of place. But I help them to sort of focus on the most important thing for the child. I tell them about the laws, about their rights, about what they can and can't do, and really focusing on the safety of the child. So I do often do sort of parenting sessions. I give education, give information to both parents, and I try to be the mediator or the person who bridges the communication between the parties. So mostly I do family mediation, but even in organizations where there's conflict. So you can imagine like unions, for example, where people are being forced to do work that they feel is unsafe, especially during this time. But they need the resources. There are a lack of resources. So if I'm being told I have to go in there in a hospital setting, but I don't have PPE equipment, not sufficient, or it's been used before, absolutely, there are certain laws and rights that people need to access. So as a social worker, because I don't just focus on the brain, psychologists just focus on the individual's brain, but a social worker also looks at the whole ecosystem. So we look at the family system, we look at the social system, so all the environmental layers that impact our mind, impact the way we survive, our instincts and everything. So it's sort of a holistic picture of an individual. So we do what's called a biopsychosocial assessment. That's the first thing that I do with my clients. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to show a little diagram that I think might be helpful for people.
Sure.
So one of the first things I get people to do is, I would say, there's I don't know if you can see this properly, but it's basically a circle with 4 sections. Can you see that? And
Yes.
basically, this is me telling people this is like your health. Okay, so there are 4 components of health. Can you guess what are the 4 components of health? Can you guess?
I let you do. You are the expert. I let you.
Okay, so I don't know if you can read this, but basically it says mental,
Physical.
physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. I don't know if you can see that very well, but
Yes, I could
yeah.
say it.
So basically, the first thing I get people to do, because I'm really about educating people and sort of empowering people. So I never tell them what to do. Oh, you should do this or you should do that. I don't think that's right. Instead, what I do is I get them to draw a big circle. And this is adopted from the indigenous community where they look at wellness and health is a product of not just our physical health, but all the aspects. So what we want to do is sort of look at what am I doing to cope physically, for example, exercise, eating right, sleeping, getting enough sleep, doing those kind of physical things like hygiene and all of that, that takes care of the physical body. But then, just as we take care of our
Absolutely.
physical body, we want to take care of our emotional health, which is what's going on right now. So we can appreciate that
Oh.
even if I have,
So
yeah.
I would like to ask you, what motivates you to become a psychotherapist? What was your motivation?
Well, I have always felt a deep desire to make a difference, to help people. I myself, my parents immigrated from India. They faced a lot of challenges and barriers, a lot of discrimination, employment, stress, and education, adversity, racism, lots of things. And I also myself went through bullying when I was growing up. I have had disabilities in my life that challenges I've faced. And so I've always had that empathy and that desire to help other people like myself, like my family, to succeed. I feel that social work is about trying to elevate people. There'll always be some people of more privilege in our society, and there's a lot of people who face oppressions. But if there's a way to
Mm-hmm.
kind of balance that and help people to know their rights, know how they can advocate for themselves, know where to get resources, where they can get support, I feel like that's my role.
That's amazing, Hall.
Yeah, it's my
What
calling.
type?
Yeah.
You mentioned in the interview you sent me, no, the video you sent me yesterday about psychotherapy was one form.
So psychotherapy is
So my question would be, what different forms exist? Like, if you want to
sure.
cure yourself, besides
Yes.
psychotherapy, what's the option, and what is psychotherapy too?
Okay, so psychotherapy means psycho means sort of the brain, right? And there's different ways to work with people who have different emotional injuries. So with my diagram, I was just about to talk,
Mm-hmm.
so good segue about emotional health. And so there's some people who have had post-traumatic stress disorder, which is like, for example, one of my clients I was talking to yesterday is he was in the war back in 2011, and
Mm-hmm.
he used to hear as a soldier he would hear bombs dropping, and so still to this
Oh,
day when he hears a loud thud like that, he panics and he gets that same level of anxiety, and it takes him right back there to where he was. So there are many people all over the world who are traumatized people who've been refugees, who've been persecuted from their countries, who've experienced like random acts of violence. And I say random because you could just be walking down the street and all of a sudden, you get shot, or like something like what's happening with COVID. You're healthy one day and you don't even know you might have it, or you might be a carrier, and you could have this for 14 days and not even know, and then all of a sudden you get sick, and your family member is not there anymore. And this actually has happened to a couple of people that I know, not like imminent people, but people long distance, through family friends that have actually died from COVID, and they were like totally fine a year ago or even a few months ago. So this is a shock to the system. And what I want to say about this, it impacts mental and emotional health. So psychotherapy focuses on how we can learn to self-regulate the mind. Okay, so in everyone's brain, we have a primitive stem of the brain, the back of our forehead, and that is where we store
Okay.
emotional memories. Okay, so that's our emotions, it's our limbic system. And when we were primitive men and women, this is the instinct that if you see a predator coming at you, you know how to do one of three things, and this is an instinct. Okay, so we either know how to fight back, or to run away, which is called flight, or to freeze, like a deer in the headlights. So those are the three things by nature, without processing the thoughts, that we automatically do. And when we face anxiety, when we
Okay.
face a fear or something that scares us, it's natural. It's totally natural to freak out. And when we say freak out, either people get so angry that they start throwing things, breaking things, getting into conflict with their spouse, maybe, just doing aggressive behaviors. Okay, and just
Okay.
in Nova Scotia, as we all know, there's the
Yeah, we all
greatest
know.
tragedy in Canadian history, with 22 people, I heard today, were shot, which is absolutely devastating. I can only imagine. But these kinds of things happen
True.
because people just snap. They lose it. So there's people who do that, and then there's people who do the opposite, which is they withdraw completely from the world. And those people are more susceptible to depression, for example, because they don't want to get out of
Okay.
bed. They don't want anyone to see them. They develop what's called phobia. And phobia is a fear of something. So some people live with social phobia or claustrophobia, and they feel like they're going to choke or something. So there's different psychotherapies that work with different types of psychopathologies, or sort of problems with how we self-regulate in our minds. So the one that I specialize with is cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness based stress reduction. Those two particular ones. I've learned many other ones, but
Okay.
those two in particular focus on how some of our thoughts, so cognition means thoughts, right? So this is the part of the brain that is called the frontal lobe, and that is the part of the brain that is in charge of executive functions. Executive functions are things like thinking through logic, right? Making good decisions, being able to evaluate and analyze information. So, if I won't notice that, I can analyze, am I overreacting to this problem, or is it like a legitimate reason, right? So weighing out pros and cons, that's what this part of the brain does. When this part of the brain, the emotional brain, is too stimulated, like we're so scared, we're so overwhelmed, then this part of the brain shuts off. It just shuts down, and that's
Wow.
because that that's part of the brain that, when we are in the survival mode, that part of the brain shuts down the blood supply to everything. Like it's ready to go to war. So that we have to be
Okay.
very careful with at this time, because everyone is on edge, right? So in order for our coping skills to work, which is the mental part of the brain, the cognitive part of the brain, we need to be able to calm down first, which is where mindfulness based stress reduction comes from. Those are things like doing mindful activities like meditation practices, for example. So there's various types of meditation practices
Okay.
I teach my clients, especially getting the fresh air, because right now, to be honest, one of the big problems is that we're not getting fresh air. And that's a problem because it's
True.
not natural to our species not to get oxygen. Oxygen helps to regulate the blood flow and helps to oxygenate the body so we can think more clearly. So we need to be drinking more water
Oh,
now. We need to open the windows more. We need to have plants, maybe house plants in the house, because plants and trees give off oxygen, right? Trees and plants, the green, it helps to oxygenate the environment. So I always tell my clients to do
yeah.
things like drink peppermint tea, eat lots of greens, drink lots of water. One of the reasons I'm wearing green is that it's color therapy too, believe it or not. Even wearing jewelry, like this is a
I'm
jade
wearing
ring.
green too.
Good for you. I love it.
Uh-huh.
Yes, green is so therapeutic. You can even meditate on the color green, believe it or not, because green calms us. Because remember, we're technically we're animals. We
Yeah.
our species, we used to live in the forest. We're not meant for being in like closed spaces and offices with no greenery. We need green.
Oh.
We need green in every capacity. And that is the color that brings life into the system. So just to answer, go back to your question, there are literally hundreds of psychotherapies, like hundreds. There, and I've studied so many of them because I find it fascinating to study different types of psychotherapies. In terms of PTSD specifically, there are exposure therapies, for example, like. For example, let's say I'm so scared of public speaking. Like some people, for them, that is really scary to stand
Mm-hmm.
up and people and talk. And so we
Yeah.
start with like little baby steps, right? So I get them to, practice, like they visualize that they were saying something in front of some people and try to look at their cognitions. Again, their cognition means how we think, how we process information. So I look at what
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, what beliefs they have about themselves that they associate with certain emotions, right? So really the core belief for that person might be people are going to laugh at me. I'm not good enough. So they might have some like specific thoughts about that. And that is what's driving their anxiety. So if we can dispute, and that's what we call it, if we can dispute the negative thoughts that they have about themselves and change them to positive thoughts, then we can change the outcomes and the behaviors. So that's
Mm-hmm.
essentially cognitive behavioral therapy looks at how to dispute our irrational beliefs, negative thinking. So negative thinking
Yeah.
doesn't mean something that's not objective, right? So what I mean by that is sometimes, for example, somebody might say, you know what, I can't do this. I suck. I'm so stupid, right? They might say things like that to themselves. And when you say the word can't, what's wrong with
Mm-hmm.
that word? What's wrong with the word can't? I always ask, what's wrong with that word? What do you think? Can't means you give up before you start, right? So
Mm,
so
true.
yeah, so if you keep telling yourself over and over again, I can't do something, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to demobilize yourself. Similarly, when some people say, I always screw up, I always, that's an exaggeration. Most people, what they mean to say is sometimes. Sometimes I do, or a lot of the time. But when you use words, words are very powerful, right? And the more we say certain words, the more we actually brainwash ourselves to believe that they're true. So, with the type of psychotherapy I do, I help people to start to identify these irrational beliefs that they have and then work on how we could
Mm-hmm.
change those things so they're more realistic and more useful and more flexible.
Okay. So my next question is, what do you think about what the governor of New York, Cuomo, said about the fact that we are all in COVID-19 and we are facing a PTSD situation?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a mass PTSD. Usually, there's one person, two people, you know, like it's a micro kind of situation, but this is a macro situation. And macro means
Mm-hmm.
it's a global pandemic. So what that means is it's dangerous because
Yes.
if I'm if I get triggered easily, let's say I get upset easily and I already have difficulty managing my stress and managing my
Mm-hmm.
irritation level. Let's look in the family. The family is sort of the first system, right? If the wife is irritable and the husband is irritable and snappy, what do you think is going to happen? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to have one person
It's
who's
gonna
a little
clash.
bit cool, right? So when you have everybody out there who has a short fuse, who's about to snap, who's on edge, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's dangerous for public safety, right? So we have this terrible mass shooting that happened in Nova Scotia. I mean, can you imagine if there's more people like this? That's very scary, you know, because we don't just have a problem of
It
a
is.
physical health catastrophe. Any physical illness, including chronic pain, chronic suffering, people have lost their money, they've lost their marriages, they've lost a lot of stuff. When you are angry and you feel like your life is not worth
Mm-hmm.
living anymore, people are suicidal, people are homicidal, people do all kinds of stuff. And the psychopathologies are increasing. So we need more people who are trained, like myself, in psychotherapy. Especially, I would say for PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
EMDR is probably the best evidence based technique out there. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And what that is, it's a form of hypnosis. Okay. So it helps people
Okay.
to go into their unconscious and to actually process their anger, because people have a lot of this crap stuff down in their body. They've held it for years and then they just snap. So what this does is it helps to whatever we mask. You know, a lot of times people stay busy, they don't think about, you know, where all the damage is. Those things can curl up in a knot and just stay there, and then they brew and they explode. So what we try to do with that specific technique, you have to be very skilled to really do that, because you can do damage to someone if you're not trained properly in this technique. But it helps to actually process their
Oh,
grief and
so
their
psychotherapist is better than in that case.
no, it is a psychotherapy. I'm mentioning is a form of psychotherapy. There are hundreds of types of
Oh,
psychotherapy.
it's a deep one. Okay.
It's one of them. It is, so there we're all
Okay.
trained in different ways. Yeah, so that's a different form. So depending on the type of mental health problem you have, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
seek out a particular modality that might be more useful for you, right? So the things that I do is
Okay.
what would help,
So,
like, yeah, go ahead.
so for you, do you agree with the term PTSD? COVID-19 is PTSD.
It definitely, for sure, absolutely, it's a very traumatic point in history. Absolutely. It's very traumatizing on so many levels. And people who are experiencing people dying like flies in front of them. I mean, that's very traumatizing and it's shocking.
Okay. And how do you think, or how would you advise to mobilize facing COVID-19? Like if it was a PTSD, facing the isolation,
So
what
yeah.
would be the best way to mobilize itself um, to
So
face it?
yeah, so like I was showing with my diagram, I think it's very important for people to reach out for mental health help. And right now, I offer telephone and video counseling for people so they don't have to go anywhere. And it's really important that people contact their EAP providers if they are working, if they have benefits, they can get this for free. Okay, and it's absolutely necessary right now, because it's not just our physical body, like this has remnant effects, PTSD effects later on. So we need to improve our psychosocial functioning first of all. So we need to take care of our diet, we need to drink enough water, we need to do some
Mhm.
exercise around the house, we need to still socialize, because remember, we are social beings. So it's our nature. We need to interact with each other. We're
Mhm.
doing this right now, right? Using Zoom, using technology. going
Yes.
on the phone. We have to connect with each other. It's absolutely necessary. And also make ourselves laugh. You know, I mean, it's a terrible situation, but if we watch the news all the time, if we focus on the negative all the time, we're going to be more depressed. So it's really important, I think, to have a meditation practice. And what that means is being able to reflect and introspect, focusing on your inside and thinking about all the things, for example, that you're grateful for. So a lot of people, a lot of my clients have actually told me that they're having home cooked meals with their family for a change. They're spending time with their kids. They're you know, they're getting a chance to pause on life. So that's actually healthy in a lot of ways. They're focusing on the positives or the silver lining, and I actually think that people have learned to appreciate the simple freedoms that we have, that we take for granted in life. I think a lot of people are starting to appreciate that now.
Mm,
So I think that we will change as a
that's great.
society. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, how do you think this PTSD or pandemic we are facing will impact us culturally?
Well, if people don't get help, it will have a terrible effect. But I'm hoping that if people get help now, and they do what they can to self-regulate and manage their stress and manage their emotions and anxiety and depression and all those things, and equip themselves with good healthy skills and conflict resolution and communication and stuff, then we can avoid the impact of the PTSD. If people don't get help and just stay with it, what I'm seeing actually on the rise, aside from domestic violence, is substance use. I can't tell you how many of my clients
Oh,
are using, like, for example, cannabis all the time because they just want to escape, or they're drinking alcohol all the time. So people are just trying to escape reality. And I mean, for sure, like, there's a spectrum, right? So if somebody wants to have a glass of wine or whatever, it's fine. But when we are emotional, when we are feeling stressed, people are overeating,
mhm,
they have no self-control, and this is very dangerous, right? Because obviously people are intoxicated, they can't function at work, they are doing things that are inappropriate, they're causing
oh,
damage to their liver, to their bodies. There's so many harmful effects of substance use, and it's addictive, of course, right? So I mean, we're going to see a lot more impact in terms
mhm,
of people having mental health and addictions issues. We're also going to see violence, right? So if people are not able to manage, then we might see that. But again, I'm hoping that does not happen. There are things that we can do to protect ourselves, to strengthen our ability to cope, so that we don't have to get to that level.
okay. Do you have any exercise or routine you would advise to use to kind of cope and face the situation of panicking or avoid
Yeah.
using substances?
Yes. So I think it's very important to get enough rest, to get enough sleep is really important for the immune system. I myself do struggle with insomnia, but I've had to do some things to help myself to improve my quality of sleep. So, for example, having a routine, the same time you go to bed at night, and then you wake up in the morning at the same time. So even though you're at home, you want to have a routine. Some people are sleeping 2 a.m., waking up at 12, like, not having a routine. This is really bad. So we need to have proper routine for waking and sleeping. That gives your a circadian rhythm for your body. The other thing is drinking lots of water. I can't stress that enough, because dehydration actually makes us think less clearly. So we need to be hydrated. It oxygenates our body and helps us to calm our nervous system. Avoiding, like, highly processed foods, sugar, caffeine, those kinds of
Mhm,
things, that will also help us to be naturally more able to calm ourselves. In terms of actual breathing technique, that is really simple to do. So it's called
mhm,
pranayama. So prana is sort of the life force, so the breathing. So we're looking at, you take your thumb, right? Obviously, make sure you
mhm,
sanitize, And then what you're doing is you're putting it on this side, and you're going to take a deep breath in for 4 on one side. So you go, and then on the other side, exhale. Right? And then you switch, right? So you go back and forth, one side and then the other side. And you do that for as long as you can.
So
What
4 seconds
that does,
each side.
yes. But you want to try to do the breathing from your diaphragm, from your lower abdomen level. And you want to get as
Okay.
much air as possible. What I always recommend, like I love to open the window, no matter how cold it is, especially at night, to breathe. Because if you're not getting enough oxygen, you're going to get tension headaches. You're going to feel more tired. You're going to be more irritable. So it's almost like, imagine, a caged animal, like without any fresh air or sunlight. Sunlight as well is really important. If you can get outside even to get some fresh air, that's amazing for your body. If not, make sure you're taking vitamin D, because vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin. And we need that because it prevents depression, right? Like depression people get when they're not eating enough nutrients, they're not eating a healthy diet, when they're not taking care of their self-care, when they're are not able to process very difficult things in life. And so these things are all things that can aid. So just keep that circle in mind that I had before, that we need to do something every day for our physical health, okay, our emotional health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. So I just want to briefly touch on those three because we've only really talked about the physical health. When I say emotional health, what I mean is, for somebody to be emotionally healthy, they need to be happy, right? So we want to find things that give us pleasure, that help us to focus on the positives. So what helps with that? Well, family relationships help with that. Healthy relationships with people, maintaining that connection, doing hobbies and interests, like maybe you love cooking, or you love doing some crafts, or dancing or music. Making sure you engage in those pleasurable activities that really nurture and feed your soul emotionally. Those are things that can really help us with that piece. For the mental piece, what's really important is stimulating your mind. So doing mental exercises, like learning something new, researching something, questioning something, even having an intellectual conversation, that can be stimulating. And also, there's puzzles and games and all kinds of things that we can do to really exercise our brain muscles, right? So our neurons, so that we can actually improve our mental functioning. Because what people are doing is they're zoning out, they're watching TV, they're not stimulating their brain right now, and we need to do that. Okay, that's really necessary for us. And then the last piece, but not least, I think is probably the most important, is the spiritual piece. So spirituality is not the same thing as religion. People can overlap those two, but really spiritual means it's that connection with your soul, with your spirit, with the person that you are, and wherever you derive your core values, your beliefs, the things that you're most passionate about. So for me, it's my profession of social work, where I really believe in empowerment, for example. I believe in love. I believe in peace. I believe in these kinds of universal spiritual values. So if I am going to believe in that, I also have to act that, right? So if I'm not congruent with what I'm saying about myself, if I'm not acting, if I'm not being an honest person, but I'm expecting people to be honest with me, that doesn't make sense, right? So we have to have a congruence with our values as a person to feel at peace. Okay, so if you need to feel peace in your heart, if you need to accept the way things are, you can't be angry. You have to be able to forgive others, because that is toxic energy that you hold in your soul, right? So for some people it is prayer. So they use prayer as a way to say, I forgive this person, I want to cleanse my soul, I'm not going to let this affect me, those kinds of things. So for some people prayer works. For some people it's them introspecting with their own thoughts, with their own feelings. with their own experience in life. So it's a journal writing, for example, or going for a walk, going for a run, processing those feelings in their own way. So we all have a different way of doing that, which is quite beautiful. But I think it's very
Mhm.
necessary for people to connect with their soul, because oftentimes in our society, we're running around and just focusing on superficial physical things and not
Yeah,
really the
true.
deep stuff that, like, we are more than just our body. We're just phenomenal.
True.
Yeah.
Vinita, where would my audience find you if they need help or support? Where would they find you? What's your website or
Sure.
contact details?
Sure. So they can contact, there's two providers. One is a private one that I work for, Homewood Health. So it's only through people who have Homewood Health benefits, insurance benefits. They can contact me through there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also TeleCBT, which is www.telecbt.ca. So that's the cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's across Canada. So any province, if you live, you can also work with me there. And then my private practice is with Intelligent Health Group. So intelligenthealthgroup.ca. If you like, I can also send the links for all these things as well, and the phone numbers, and they can
Yes, it
actually
would be
call.
nice if you could add it under
Yeah.
this.
Yes. Right here. Yeah. Sure. So I can do that. And sorry, I'll do that in a minute. I just have to.
Okay.
Oh, I think I lost. Did I lose you?
Oh, you could add it after the interview,
Oh, sure.
all the links.
I'll do it
Okay.
after. Yeah, I'll do it after. I'll send you all the links, and free consultations as well. I'm offering as well at this time. So we'll get through this. I'm sure we will. And I think there's opportunities for us to all learn more about each other and be more respectful and sort of come together as a humanity. I really hope that for the world is that we, at this point, it doesn't matter um, somebody's age, somebody's class, somebody's race, somebody's gender. None of these
Mhm.
things matter. We're all human, period. So it's time to
Cool.
stop
Mm.
talking about who's different and that. We need to help each other as a human global society. And that's what I really pray for the world, that out of all of this is that we're going to see humanity, right? We're going to start to love each other, respect each other as people. Okay. Are you there?
Yes, I think we have some moments cutting in and out, but mostly okay.
Okay.
So I just added a free consultation with Vinita, visible for everybody to see, and that you're gonna add the link below where they could contact you.
Sure.
My point is, since we have to mobilize ourselves facing COVID-19, what would be the best process to demobilize ourselves once it's done? Because going back to normal is gonna be something hard.
So I don't think we will ever return to where we were before. And that's okay. I think collectively our consciousness, our conscious level is going to transcend. So we will start to, like I said, recognize each other as one humanity, and that we can all be affected by
Mm-hmm.
one thing together. And so I think there'll be more people willing to do cooperate with each other, work together, right? And the way we have virtual technology to do things, like, I mean, technology is absolutely necessary. And I know that's how one of the reasons why I connected with you so well is that I think technology is essential, that we actually develop that more and learn to find different ways that everybody can get involved. Because through this type of modality, it doesn't matter if you're somebody living in India in the slums or living in a five-star mansion. We can connect through technology, and we can share our stories and experiences. And I think that it makes the world accessible. And so I want to thank you as well for providing that platform and the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you so much.
My next question would be, this time it's a little bit different from the cultural one we had earlier. It's more like the fact that in certain culture you have to shake hands. In certain area you have to do things that are kind of non-existent anymore with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
How does it affect you if your culture or your religion asks you or requests you to do that? How do you face the fact that you can't
Yeah.
do what should be done?
No,
How do you
absolutely not.
cope?
There's no safety is the most important thing. Period. That's it. So it doesn't matter about that at this point. It's about human safety and human contact. We know that by research that, I mean, any type of contact, even, we should be closing our mouth or our face, being 6 feet apart from each other. But absolutely not at this point in time. It's too risky. So it doesn't matter about that. All the cultural things or whatever, it matters about safety.
And how do you think if somebody is really religious and let's say the Idol Kebir is coming soon and it's never going to happen because all the mosques are closed, how do you cope with that situation where you know you can't go and pray in a mosque?
Well, people pray at home all the time. So people do the
True.
namaz 5 times a day at home. So God is everywhere, right? God lives in our heart. So I don't think it's necessary to go to a particular place because God sees you everywhere. So I don't think that's a thing. Safety is number one, and if you can actually potentially infect someone or get sick or die, I mean, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it at all.
Okay. So don't you think some people would have a snap because of that situation, not facing that, not being able to cope with their face?
So it's survival of the fittest, right? At this point. So what that means
Mm-hmm.
is Charles Darwin once said in his Origin of Species is that we need to adapt to what's happening, and if we don't learn to be flexible and adapt to our environment, then we're going to sink. Like, we're not going to make it. We're not going to survive. So we have to sometimes get out of our comfort zone. We have to challenge ourselves to think differently about things, to question things, to analyze things from a different angle. And that's why I said using your cognitive muscles, your thinking, your mental stimulation is really important, because people who
Mm-hmm.
don't think about things or problem solve or question things very well, they end up thinking that this is my only choice. I have no other choice but to go and shoot this person or do this kind of thing, because they are not able to analyze and think of options. They're not able to use their brain. So that's what happens.
Okay.
But we need to do that so that we can question things, we can work together, we can collaborate, we can communicate in different ways, right? We need to think of different ways of solving problems. That's the biggest problem with the world, is if we are too simplistic with our thinking, we will not survive.
Okay. Do you have any exercise you would kind of share with us how to do it? Feel, let's say you are locked down for more than a month. What kind of exercise you could do to kind of escape, even if you are locked down in your apartment?
So are you talking about mental exercise, physical exercise, emotional exercise, spiritual
Both,
exercise?
because you said psychotherapist is both of them. So,
Yeah.
so
So
maybe an exercise that
so
could
so
help your
yeah,
brain.
sure. So I'll give you a very simple cognitive behavioral therapy exercise that I get patients to do, and this is a really good little tool. So if you take a piece of paper and you divide it into three columns, you have A, the letter
Mm-hmm.
A, B, C. So A stands for what's called
Okay.
activating events. Okay, activating events are triggers. So there can be internal triggers or external triggers. When I say trigger, I mean, what is it that pushes your buttons? Things that irritate you, things that make you anxious, things that make you upset.
Mm.
What are those triggers? So sometimes we trigger ourselves, and we just start thinking about something that happened, I don't know, on the news, or something that happened the other day, and we just end up thinking about that and we can't get it out of our head. So that's us stimulating ourselves. And then there's people who it's
Okay.
through the outside. Somebody says, you're such an idiot, or like they say something really mean to someone, and that's a trigger, you know. So we have to be able to identify the triggers. That's column A, activating triggers. Okay, then you follow that to column
Okay.
B, and
Mm-hmm.
column B is beliefs. So beliefs means as soon as that happens, as soon as you get triggered, however you get triggered, what are your beliefs
Trigger. Mm-hmm.
about what just happened? So let's say I was driving down the road and somebody cut me off. Let's say that's my activating event. Right
Okay.
away, I could say,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, like I'm shocked that somebody just cut me off, and I could have had a car accident, I could have died, I could have gotten hurt. So who does this jerk think he is? Like how dare he? Like I might just really start thinking that. And then
Yeah.
the more I'm saying that to myself, the more I'm getting my arousal up, so I'm getting more upset. So one person who's like that might say, you know what, I'm going to teach this guy a lesson. Who does he think he is? So if that person starts thinking those kind of beliefs or thoughts, they might rush up against that car and cut that person off now, right? So what that simple demonstration is just to show you that when we get triggered, there could be somebody who could become aggressive, but what leads to the aggression is their thoughts. What is it that they're telling themselves? I have to teach this person a lesson. Who does this person think they are? You're fueling your emotions by what you're thinking, you see. And then there could be somebody else who could react totally differently. They would say, you know what, it's not worth it, right? Like it's that guy was a jerk or whatever, but I don't have to be just as bad as him, and I don't want to get into any conflict here, so I'm just going to get off the road or something. So it doesn't mean that two people who experience the same problem have the same behavior. We're all different, right? So with this
Okay.
exercise,
I see.
if you practice it at home, it's a reflection tool that if you're noticing you're having arguments with your spouse, if you're noticing that your parenting style is getting a bit harsh with your kids, or you're not communicating effectively as a family, is to like sit down with a piece of paper and sort of try to start analyzing, okay, how was I triggered, like what happened, and what was I thinking at that time, and how did that lead me to feel a certain way or act a certain way. And so if we start really raising our own awareness about what we're doing and take accountability for our actions, only then can we actually learn to
Mm-hmm.
resolve conflict and problem solve together as a family.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would be your advice for ladies stuck with their abusers?
Yeah. So, well, before answer
Women
that
in this
question,
situation.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to address the fact that there are many men who are also abused. And I just want to say that
Oh.
because I think oftentimes there's a misunderstanding, and people assume that it's only women, and there is sometimes a bias that police have towards women, which is not true, because I've met so many clients, sadly, who have been abused as men. And remember, the word abuse is not just physical. Okay, abuse can be
Mm-hmm.
emotional, it can be psychological, it can be social. So somebody might isolate that person, somebody might put that person down, intimidate them, threaten them. There's all kinds of things, or say things to the children to, you know, hurt that person, or all of these things. There's so many ways that people abuse people. Abuse basically means having power over another person. Somebody trying to
How is it different from bullying?
it's actually very similar
How is
to
it
bullying.
different from
It's
bullying?
actually very similar to bullying. I'm glad you brought that up. It is basically bullying at workplaces. I deal with workplaces. And so I often see even managers and employers like humiliating. You know, when you humiliate someone at work in front of their colleagues or people, that's a form of abuse too. Or, you know, if you're making somebody do something that is not in their contract, like, you know, like some of these union issues that I've had to deal with lately, this is abuse. So there's abuse everywhere, and people do this more when they feel they need to hold on to their power. So this is a common human problem, is that everyone is afraid of losing power and control. And sometimes people feel like if they impose that on another person, then they will somehow feel, okay, I can, it's not me, it's going to be someone else. But we have to let go of that mentality, because if we're going to survive as a society, we need to actually work together and not compete and not compare, but we need to actually help each other. That's the only way this is going to work. So sorry, your question was about abuse, and sorry, what was your entire question?
For a woman stuck with her abuser.
Yeah. So
how to cope as a woman if you are locked down with an abuser?
It's very scary. I have to say, I've done some safety planning. So safety planning, again, these telephone numbers, crisis numbers, there's so many 24/7 people can access. And I can also send you those links as well, that you can call anytime.
Yes, would be great to have it.
Yeah, anytime you can call the Assaulted Women's Helpline. You can contact the crisis lines, the suicide prevention line. There's all these like great services now, and even virtual services like mine, but others as well, where people can get counseling anytime. Sometimes I'm on the phone at 4 a.m. Sometimes I'm on the phone at 1 a.m. Like it's just, if people need it, it's a crisis. And so we can help that person if they're in imminent danger, to call the police while I have the person on the phone, making sure that they're okay. And sometimes I've had to be on a call where the police actually get there, and then they apprehend the perpetrator, or I tell them, oh, go lock yourself in the room. I give them advice about keeping a safety bag. So basically having it all prepared just in case, a change of clothes, your photo ID, resources, phone numbers of people you can contact, some money, right? All these kind of few things that if you need to run, if you need to make a dash, you can do that. Right. So it's all about preparation and being prepared. Unfortunately, a lot of people are in the situation right now because first of all, social distancing, you can't even like go anywhere really. Secondly, it's very expensive. So if I have no money to get a divorce or separate from my partner, I'm kind of living with my partner, and the kids are there, and it's very, very, very dangerous. It scares me, actually. It really does scare me. So the best thing we can do is arm ourselves with resources, know our rights, know when to call the police, who to get support from. So if I, have a friend or someone that I know they have like a room where I could, crash my head or get away if I'm in imminent danger. So we're talking about physical abuse there, right? But when it's emotional abuse, when it's economic abuse, there is nothing like that, because those things are not really against the law. I mean, they're mean things to do to people, but we don't really have laws that can actually prosecute someone for calling someone a bitch, or calling them names or putting them down. Right? Like we don't have that. I mean, that's what, you know what I mean? So so in that case, I think mediation services are really important. I mean, but mediation requires both parties to agree to get a third party involved. Same with couples counseling. I can't just work with one person. Like, I mean, I can, but that's half the equation, right? So if the partner,
you can't solve the problem.
the wife is, like, that's not going to solve the problem. Even as much as I say, oh, take a deep breath and this and that, I mean, that's not going to help your situation. There you know. So it has to make sense. So safety, number one. And then, just planning and getting those people to reach out for community help is super, super important. I know your question is a hard one, because there really isn't a simple answer to that. But there are resources available. That's all I can say.
And also, I have a lot of people right now in this situation in COVID-19. They are not sure if they want to move forward to kind of get their independence, like economical independence, to be able to move forward, because they are so into the bullying system and abusive system that they kind of lost any confidence and they don't feel empowered enough or strong enough to make any action. What would you tell those ones?
So, sorry, just to clarify your question, you're talking about people who don't feel they can um, get a
Like
job,
they
or
are women in abusive,
okay,
yes, in abusive situation, and they don't trust themselves being able to do something because the abuser
yeah,
used to tell
oh
them they
yeah,
are
yeah,
good,
yeah,
not good enough,
oh of
and there was
course.
nothing they could do to be good enough.
Yeah, I mean that's a trauma, right? So when people go through domestic violence or any form of violence, it's traumatizing. That's a trauma. That's what we call trauma. So that takes years of work, possibly, depending on how bad the abuse was on that person. And it's something called the gaslight effect. Have you ever read that book before, by any chance? Gaslight effect? Are you
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
No.
so it's actually a type of syndrome. So what that is that we become so accustomed to someone putting us down and treating us that way that we end up doing that to ourselves, and we don't necessarily recognize that we're doing that to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. But it becomes programmed in our brain. So the abuser would call us like stupid or insulting our intelligence, and we start really feeling, believing that that's true. Like, and we start actually living out that experience because we've been brainwashed to believe that. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it even stems from childhood, where our parents used to tell us that we're not good enough and all of that. And then we find partners that say the
Mm-hmm.
same thing to us. So it takes a lot of deconditioning. So there are behavioral modification type of psychotherapies, again, that can help for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another reason to reach out for counseling, for psychotherapy, for clinical help, because there are ways to work with clients on that, but you need to have the motivation to do it, and you need to recognize that, and people are scared. There's a lot of fear around it, obviously. So that's why I think telephone counseling is probably ideal for someone like that, because first of all, they might feel self-conscious, they might feel scared to go publicly somewhere. And so it's private, it's confidential, they can be anywhere and they can have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation like we are having right now. And
Mm-hmm.
with these kind of exercises, they're exercises, I basically assign homework after every session with a client, and they learn to
Mm-hmm.
recognize their beliefs and their thoughts and all the garbage that's been bottled up for so many years, and we work with them
Mm-hmm.
to unprocess those thoughts so that they can start to see things in a new way. They start to see themselves in a new way. They build their self esteem again. So it is possible. I have seen people change and improve, but it just takes work.
Okay. So what they need to do is to contact you and get a free consultation and start from there.
Well, not necessarily me. I mean, there's so many fabulous therapists out there, and there's therapists who specialize in different issues. So I would say if somebody's like experiencing domestic violence, they should probably contact family services. They should
Mm-hmm.
contact victim services.
Okay.
There's actual specific ones for people experiencing violence in their relationships. I do mediation. So if people are going through divorce and separation cases and they
Mm-hmm.
want to work through those agreements so they don't have to waste a fortune on court costs and things like that, then I can help them with that. I can help them create a parenting plan, a parent coordination plan, so that they're not fighting about custody and access, and you have the kids on these days and so to avoid those kind of conflicts, I can help them to mediate that. so
Yeah.
so I'm just saying that there's so many different types of specializations, and I think people should not just go to me, but go to the person that's right for them, because it has to be about who they're comfortable with and what they need help with. And frankly, for money, because
Okay. So I think it would be a
yeah,
good. Mhm.
I'm just saying, for because people are
I think it would be a good idea to add the link.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because people who don't have the financial resources to afford private counseling, they should go to nonprofit organizations like family services. They can help them with this kind of stuff, and finances are minimal that you spend on that kind of stuff. And victim services, all of these organizations are nonprofits. So nonprofits, they will pay less money to get help.
That's awesome, because I'm not sure if everybody knows about those options they have with the nonprofit organizations.
I'll definitely send you some resources. And another one that everyone should know, especially in the GTA or in Ontario anyways, is 211. So 211 is the number that you call, and it's for social services in general. And so you just, an operator answers the phone, and you just say,
and what's that number?
211. There's
211. Okay.
211 or 311 sometimes, depending on the province.
Good.
But I'll send you a bunch of, I'll send you like a
That's
whole
great to know.
No problem. Yeah.
That would be great. I'm going to add it below this video.
Sure. Yeah. The government has so many resources right now too. Like Justin Trudeau just announced a lot of money for mental health services, and Homewood Health, where I work as well. Like they have a portal for resources that clients can access for free. So there are things that people can do that don't cost any money as well, right? Because I don't want people to have to feel that way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Vinita. If you want to add some last word, a final word.
I just want to say that I think that we're all doing this really well. I think a lot of people are struggling, but there are a lot of people who are doing some great work. People are donating a lot of money towards PPE. People are, giving out food, collecting money for charities. There's so much great humanity that we've seen during this time, and I'm really proud of us. And I think we're gonna become better and stronger together as a human global society. And I wish that for all of us. And I think that that we're going to transition into a higher state of consciousness, all of us. And so I just want to thank you as well for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I hope something I've said has helped some people. And I will send you a lot of resources as well, depending on what people's financial situation is. Some people can afford and some people can't, and that's totally understandable.
Thank you so much, Vinita. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you. You too. Thanks.